Hundreds and hundreds of million-dollar Chinese companies are in severe debt and filing for bankruptcy. This is due to the economic fallout caused by the Chinese Communist Party virus pandemic. Over 300 million Chinese people have quit the CCP and related organizations online, and Slovakia passed a law defining the Communist Party as a criminal organization. It's the sixth country from the previous Communist Bloc in East Europe to take action of this kind. Confucius Institutes are part of the United Front network of the Chinese Communist Party. This network has infiltrated every level of U.S. society. The U.S. is fighting back, imposing sanctions on 4 more Chinese officials in Hong Kong. And who will win the U.S. election? This will have a huge impact on China's fate. The lawsuits on election fraud are moving on in different states. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we turn to China's economy. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, virus pandemic has severely affected hundreds of large Chinese enterprises. That's based on a report by the Chinese Central Bank. Nearly 600 are facing financial troubles. About 3/4 of them are in severe levels of debt or have applied for bankruptcy. These are companies that have assets valued over $60 million. This, according to the Central Bank of China's Financial Stability Report released on Friday. It says the financial troubles concern about $600 billion of assets between the companies, adding that $90 billion of it are non-performing assets. That means it's money lent to a third party, and that has little chance of being paid back. Enterprises that are in trouble include the sales, transportation, and manufacturing industries. Over 367 million Chinese have formally declared to detach themselves from the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliate organizations at an overseas website. The number is growing by almost 70,000 each passing day. This represents the rise of the Chinese people and a rejection of the regime.
For 16 years, Chinese people have been joining the, quote, quitting the Chinese Communist Party movement. More and more Chinese have formally declared their wish to detach themselves from the CCP and its affiliates on a website abroad. Up till now, the number has grown to over 367 million. The US-based newspaper, The Epoch Times, published a piece entitled, quote, 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party in 2004. The publication led to the creation of the Toidong movement in the same year. Toidong can be translated literally as, quote, withdraw from the Communist Party. The movement encourages people to renounce their membership in the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliates on the Chinese Epoch Times website. Some choose to use pseudonym to protect themselves and their families, and some use their real names. Charles Lee is the spokesman from the Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party, headquartered in New York. He explains the Toidong movement does not demand the establishment of any political systems, but it analyzes the problems of the Communist Party from a moral standpoint. At the beginning of this September, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, issued policy guidance declining the admission of members of the CCP and its affiliates. The certificate of quitting the CCP issued from the Epoch Times can serve as proof of formal detachment from CCP organizations. Here we share with you 2 announcements from Chinese people on the Santoi website. Taiwan. Without realizing the evilness of the Chinese Communist Party, I joined the CCP's Young Pioneer and Communist Youth League as a student. I thought back then following the CCP is following the pulse of our times, and even spread my thoughts among many of my fellow students and friends. Stepping out of university and into society, I gradually realized how bad the CCP is. Plus, I tried to break the internet firewall, which opened my eyes. And I now know the CCP is not just bad, but evil. They're demonic. I often regret saying, quote, follow the party to others. Now my family and I solemnly declare that we quit the CCP's Young Pioneer and Youth League organizations. Dan Ping-an from Xinjiang. I voluntarily quit the Chinese Communist Party and its affiliated Youth League and Young Pioneers. From now on, I absolutely have no connections with the CCP. The CCP deprived people of their rights to vote, of free speech and rights to property. People are without property security. The CCP even tries to control people's right to give birth to their children. This evil party wants to control everything in people's lives, but cannot control its own corruption. The CCP must be disbanded immediately. It's time to remove this selfish and evil regime. I wish all people in China could get to know the truth that usually people outside of China hear. No more waiting, people. Quit the CCP right away and stay safe.
Now to Central Europe. That's where the Parliament of Slovakia passed a legal amendment last week. The action declares the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia and its branch in Slovakia as criminal organizations. The Communist Party ruled from 1948 to 1990 in Czechoslovakia, part of the Soviet Union. It later peacefully dissolved into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. During its rule, the Communist Party repressed civil society and restricted civil liberties. The new amendment prohibits authoritarian symbols of communism and Nazi fascism on monuments and memorial plaques. It also forbids the naming of streets, squares, and other public places after communists or Nazi fascists. Slovakia's neighbor, the Czech Republic, legally defined the Czechoslovakia Communist Party as a criminal organization in 1993. Like many communist parties across the world, the Czechoslovak Communist Party was closely tied to political persecution and harsh punishments. The U.S. imposed sanctions on 4 more Chinese officials in Hong Kong. The officials are being singled out for their role in crushing freedoms as the Chinese Communist Party increases its control of the territory. They include the Deputy Director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office, the Deputy Commissioner of Police in Hong Kong, and 2 officials at the newly established National Security Office in Hong Kong. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said they were sanctioned for their roles in implementing Hong Kong's repressive national security law. He said they would be barred from traveling to the United States and any U.S.-related assets would be blocked. None of the 4 could be reached immediately for comment. A UK Parliament member is calling for China to be held accountable for breaking its promises to Hong Kong under the Sino-British Joint Declaration. The declaration guaranteed the financial hub freedoms not enjoyed on the mainland for at least the next 50 years. This comes as students are feeling the far-reaching effects of the national security law Beijing imposed on Hong Kong, even when they're overseas. Under Article 38 of the National Security Law, anyone, anywhere in the world could be at risk of arrest. Such people are at risk if they travel to China or even transfer flights inside a Hong Kong airport. Experts worry countries could extradite prisoners on political grounds to Beijing under this new law. Hong Kong students studying abroad are feeling the weight of that threat. 2 students at the University of Leeds told the BBC that the feeling of being monitored followed them all the way to the UK. The 2 Hong Kongers wanted to remain anonymous for fear of the national security law. Professors are working with their universities to create codes of conduct to protect students. Steps include not recording seminars, so specific words or ideas can't be tied to individuals, and some teachers are letting students submit their work anonymously. Because the law was drafted so broadly, students are having a hard time figuring out what is and isn't allowed. Others say the ambiguity is intentional as it spreads fear. China is also pressuring outsiders through economic means. Chinese students bring in a lot of revenue to foreign universities. An estimated 120,000 Chinese students studied in the UK before the pandemic. Some are saying China could threaten to stop those students from studying abroad, as it has done with Australia. An independent human rights watchdog is calling for the WHO's Coronavirus Evaluation Panel co-chair, Helen Clark, to step down. That's after it found Clark has close ties to Beijing. Clark served as the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. The WHO appointed Clark as part of its independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response. Clark served as the administrator for the United Nations Development Program in 2016. That's when she signed an agreement with China to cooperate on the Belt and Road Initiative. Clark called the deal an important catalyst and accelerator for the Sustainable Development Goals. The watchdog argues in a letter the inquiry can't meet the standards for being impartial due to Clark's ties to the communist regime. This comes after a recent New York Times report pointing out the WHO's respect and praise for Beijing throughout the pandemic. Taiwan was excluded from a key World Health Organization meeting to be held this week. It's set to focus on the pandemic. Taiwan blamed the lack of invitation on obstruction from Communist China. The WHO's World Health Assembly is its decision-making body. It does not currently include any representation from Taiwan. Before the meeting, the U.S., European Union, the U.K., Canada, and Japan, among others, called for Taiwan's participation in the meeting as an observer. Taiwan is a self-ruled democratic island. Beijing claims the territory is part of mainland China. As a result, it's been trying to block Taiwan from entering most global organizations as its own separate nation. Beijing has also attempted to block the island from setting up diplomatic relations with other countries. The U.S. cut off diplomatic ties with Taiwan over 40 years ago. That was in order to set up diplomatic relationship with mainland China. It's been called one of the Chinese Communist Party's magic weapons. Today, we introduce the so-called United Front, China's foreign influence activity network, and how its tactics may aim to infiltrate and undermine the sovereignty and integrity of Western democracies. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's so-called United Front networks have frequently appeared in the news lately.
That group is part of China's United Front Work Department, the CCP's official overseas propaganda tool. It's one of the CCP's 3 magic weapons, in the words of Chairman Mao, along with armed struggle and party building.
The United Front Work Department is the influence arm of the Communist Party. It reports directly to the CCP Central Committee. The department is also tied to thousands of affiliate organizations. Many of them claim to be independent, non-government organizations. But those organizations' leaders often serve as representatives of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, a political advisory body and a central part of the United Front system. The interconnected system aims to expand the regime's influence and make sure that non-Communist Party members in China and abroad stay united with the CCP. In the U.S., the CCP has been known to target its influence toward universities, think tanks, Chinese immigrant organizations, and of course, governmental and elected officials. The issue is important because many of the people that are influenced play a role in the U.S. policy decisions. Examples abound. One case that attracted national attention happened at Johns Hopkins University. A United Front-linked organization offered to sponsor a China Studies professorship. That's for the university's renowned School of Advanced International Studies. Many of the school's graduates enter U.S. diplomatic or intelligence agencies. The organization also sponsors other think tanks, as well as organizes trips to China. Invited guests include U.S. state and local officials and experts from organizations like the Center for American Progress. During one trip, the experts met with CCP officials and even a high-ranking Chinese military general. Another example occurred at the D.C.-based Wilson Center. The influential institute is where Vice President Mike Pence made his famous annual China speech last year. In 2018, the institute lined up a few speakers to discuss the United Front's influence activities as part of a panel discussion. The event's description argued that the influence issue is often poorly defined, exaggerated, and abused. One of the speakers lined up was Wang Huiyao. Notably, he serves as a deputy director for a United Front's agency. The Wilson Center dropped him as a speaker after Senator Marco Rubio wrote a letter asking for more disclosure about his background. Other than elite universities and think tanks, Chinese immigrant communities are also strongly targeted by the United Front. A recent Newsweek report revealed around 600 United Front bodies. The report specially pointed out what's called the Committee of 100. The New York-based advocacy group for Chinese Americans was founded nearly 30 years ago with the help of former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. The organization's chairman served on a city-level branch of the United Front, and its events include senior-level, former and current U.S. and Chinese officials and diplomats. Another case pointed out by the Newsweek report focuses on the China Institute. The New York nonprofit helped establish multiple Confucius institutes in American K-12 public schools. Confucius institutes are Chinese regime-funded language centers and have been accused by U.S. officials of exporting censorship and communist ideology to American campuses. But it's not just the elite universities and think tanks. The United Front targets all levels of society. In the words of Congress China Commission Officer Peter Mattis, the Chinese regime is aiming for an ecological change. He told Foreign Policy in an earlier report, if they cultivate enough people in the right places, they start to change the debate without having to directly inject their own voice. Chinese immigrants organizations also face influence from the United Front. When Taiwan's president visited New York last year, pro-CCP protesters physically attacked pro-Taiwan supporters. The leader of the pro-Beijing protesters is Liang Guanjun. He holds multiple titles in the United Front and is the founder of the East American Chinese Association, an organization made up of Chinese immigrants. Other than attacking Taiwan supporters, Liang also led efforts against U.S. sanctions imposed due to China's human rights abuses in Xinjiang. He defended China's actions in the region's so-called counterterrorism efforts. He had also been arrested by New York police for attacking practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation practice that's brutally persecuted in China. The attack occurred as the group demonstrated in Chinatown against Beijing's persecution. The Chinese consulate issued a statement praising Liang the day after the attack. A local United Front organization said that it would support Liang both in action and money if he became involved in any lawsuits as a result. The United Front's influence also reached Chinese assistants of U.S. politicians. According to a 2018 report by news outlet Politico, citing intelligence officials, Chinese intelligence even recruited a staff member from the office of a U.S. senator from California. The staff reported to Beijing about local politics. In the words of New Zealand's China scholar Anne-Mary Brady, the United Front work is a tool to corrode and corrupt our political system, to weaken and divide us against each other, to erode the critical voice of our media and turn our elites into clients of the Chinese Communist Party, their mouths stuffed with cash. From today on, the China in Focus team will present a section about the latest developments of the ongoing U.S. election lawsuits. The question of who will win the election is poised to have a direct influence on the fate of the Chinese Communist Party, as well as tremendous impact globally. First, we look at a new move by the U.S. Justice Department. According to reports, the Department of Justice has authorized investigations into voting fraud allegations. These investigations are to be pursued prior to the certification of elections.
Media reports are citing an apparently leaked memo in which Attorney General William Barr authorized federal prosecutors across the country to pursue substantial allegations of voting irregularities. The memo obtained by the Associated Press reads, such inquiries and reviews may be conducted if there are clear and apparently credible allegations of irregularities that, if true, could potentially impact the outcome of a federal election in an individual state. It was sent to various divisions of the Department of Justice as well as the director of the FBI. The memo added that department personnel should exercise appropriate caution and maintain the department's absolute commitment to fairness, neutrality, and nonpartisanship. Meanwhile, in the U.S. Senate, reconvening for the first time since Election Day, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said President Trump's legal challenges are legitimate.
We have the system in place to consider concerns, and President Trump is 100% within his rights to look into allegations of irregularities and weigh his legal options.
He said this process will reach its resolution once the legal challenges and recounts are completed. McConnell pointed to media organizations which have projected Democrat Joe Biden to be the winner, saying it's not the media's role to determine the outcome of the election.
And notably, the Constitution gives no role in this process to wealthy media corporations.
The Republican leader did not acknowledge Biden as president-elect or Kamala Harris as vice president-elect. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer agreed that the president has a right to bring legal challenges and request recounts where state law allows, but he denied that there was evidence of significant widespread voter fraud.
A lawsuit claims that in Michigan, many ballots arrived early in the morning after Election Day in boxes with open tops and no seals. NTD's Christina Kim has more on this.
According to the lawsuit filed on November 9th, tens of thousands of unsealed and unsecured ballots arrived in vehicles with out-of-state license plates in Michigan's Wayne County. This allegedly happened at 4:30 a.m., the morning after Election Day. 6 witnesses detailed these claims in sworn witness affidavits. One witness, Andrew Sito, says that every one of the ballots that came in at 4:30 in the morning were cast for Joe Biden. Furthermore, the suit claims that poll workers were instructed to ignore signature mismatches, backdate ballots that arrived late, and push through ballots despite questions about their validity. Sito said the election official blocked the windows of the room he was in with cardboard and refused to let him re-enter after he left for a break. Another sworn affidavit alleges that the names on the ballots from the boxes did not appear on either the qualified voter file or the supplemental list for voters who registered shortly before November 3rd. Robert Cushman said in a sworn affidavit that he saw computer operators at several counting boards manually add names and addresses to the qualified voter file. When Cushman noted that poll workers were entering the birthdays for these votes as January 1st, 1900, he was told that the instruction came down from the Wayne County Clerk's office. David Fink, a representative for the city of Detroit, said the lawsuit was raising baseless allegations that was trying to undermine confidence in a well-run election. He said the case was not based on evidence, but rather on conspiracy theories. Fink went on to say that, quote, there were more than 200 Republican challengers in the room at the TCF Center, but only 5 such people have come forward to support these claims, which actually tells us how well the process was run. Christina Kim, NTD News.
More allegations have come out, including one that says thousands of mail-in ballots were from people who weren't properly registered to vote. According to a sworn affidavit, these ballots were allegedly added to the vote count in Detroit. We'll keep you updated as the situation develops. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.